Hey there, Damon. Well, it has no doubt been a crazy couple days for Keegan Bradley since his win at the Travelers Championship, as suddenly he's having to entertain this idea he said he really hadn't given much thought to before, the possibility of being a playing captain at the Ryder Cup. And he said he was really looking forward to just being captain. The prospect of making his own team wasn't something that he had really thought about. But obviously now the situation has changed. And I got a chance earlier today here at the Rocket Classic to speak with the Ryder Cup captain about the prospect now of playing for his own team, as well as to get his reaction that he's received from friends and family since his win on Sunday.
It's been really fun. I get to head home for a day and spend it with my family, but just being around the people, giving me congrats has been really great.
You said after your victory that you hadn't really thought about this possibility of being a playing captain, but the PGA of America kind of planted that seed for you. Is that more of a pressure or a motivation for you?
Well, things are certainly different now after that win, but I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to go about this. My plan is to be the captain first, and if we get in 2 months, if we see if I'm going to help the team, then we'll have to make a decision. But as of right now, I'm still going to be just the captain.
When you're considering big decisions like this and other points in your career, what does that process sort of look like for you as you contemplate this decision going forward?
Yeah, well, it's pretty chaotic because I'm still trying to compete in my real job out here, and then when I leave here, I become the Ryder Cup captain. So I have both things to sort of distract from each other, and it's sort of been kind of nice. So when I'm out here, I have to try to leave that Ryder Cup stuff, but when I leave the golf course, I got to be the captain again, and then I got to rely on my vice captains and some of the older guys to help me guide me through this.
It's a lot to juggle, but I'm sure you feel like it's a good problem to have. We appreciate the time. Good luck this week.
Thank you.
It's a lot for Bradley to have to think about. You can hear it in his voice there, just talking about all the demands on his time right now. Now, with that win, he climbed inside the top 10 in the Ryder Cup point standings. And, of course, he will also have those 6 captain picks to make. So with a strong finish to the season, he could automatically play his way onto that team, or may have to consider the prospect of picking himself for his team. But he's got some time to think about it, as the standings won't be finalized until the conclusion of the BMW Championship in August. Now, I spoke with 2 members of the U.S. side. Collin Morikawa and Patrick Cantlay have both been a member of the U.S. Ryder Cup team. I also spoke with one of Bradley's assistant captains, Webb Simpson, asking all of them their thoughts on the possibility of Bradley being a playing captain. And when I spoke with Simpson, he had said that he actually had dinner with Bradley last night. And here's what he had to say about the prospect of Bradley being a playing member of this team.
Probably 2 or 3 holes, but he's playing so well. And so to see him come up clutch down the stretch is no surprise to any of us. And, we're giving him a hard time about, I want him in the lineup. If I'm the captain, or, Brant, as captains, we're like, he's got to play. I mean, he's one of the best players in the world. He can handle pressure. And so I was so happy for him, and what a clutch moment to make that putt on the last hole. Whatever the lineup ends up being, we're all unified. We want to put forward the best 12 guys to represent the USA. And like I said, if Keegan happens to be one of the 12, great. If not, he's going to be an incredible captain, as he's already been.
Yeah, we saw Tiger Woods do it in 2019 at Royal Melbourne. That was a President's Cup, and he did a fantastic job at it. And if Keegan decides to go that route, or he qualifies for the team, I think he'll do a great job.
If we were talking about today, I think there's a very high chance. And I think even if you talk about 2 months from now, I think there is a chance. They've got all the plans, I'm sure, in place. This wasn't something that, maybe could happen. It was a high chance that it could. And he's one of the best golfers in the world, not just for the U.S. He's one of the best golfers in the world. I think the U.S. team would want that. And we'd be giving up too much to not have that. So, look, Keegan's one of the best people that I've gotten to know on the PGA Tour. He cares so much, and he cares not just about his family and his own team, but other players out here, and that means the world. And that just shows what kind of captain he could or could, possibly be. So it's very motivating for me to go out there, play my best, and make sure I'm on that team.
You last heard there from Morikawa, who made a bit of news here this week as well. After just 4 tournaments together, he has split with Joe Greiner, his caddy. This week, Morikawa has a friend on the bag, a former college teammate. Morikawa telling me that this is just a fun 1-week arrangement as his friend failed to Monday qualify, so he'll be helping him out here this week. Morikawa telling me that, 2 people can be really good at their jobs, referring to himself and Greiner, but just didn't work out well together. Guys.
All right, Amy Rogers with all the stories at Detroit Golf Club ahead of the Rocket Classic, including Keegan Bradley, who, let's be honest, to this point, expertly playing inside the ropes, focusing as a player, and apparently outside the ropes, expertly performing as a captain and a manager. The question is, can that continue as the weeks wear on and we get closer and closer to the Ryder Cup? Can he continue to be great at both?
I think that's the big question, because when you hear his assistant captains like Webb Simpson, it sounds pretty clear that the assistant captains want him to play, that they think that he's one of the 12 best Americans. If you look at data golf, Keegan Bradley right now is the 5th best U.S. player. Amazing. He, in theory, would give them a better chance of winning against Europe at Bethpage Black. You listen to the players like Patrick Cantlay or Collin Morikawa, they say they're motivated by him. They want him on the team as well. I wrote down, as of now, this is a Keegan Bradley quote, as of now, I'm still going to be just the captain. The reason why, to me, he's saying that right now is because we sit here in late June.
Yeah.
We are 3 months away from the Ryder Cup.
And he's 9th.
He's 9th in the point standings. There are 4 consequential tournaments still to play this season, the Open Championship and the 3 FedEx Cup playoff events. If some of the players who are on sort of that 7 through 15 bubble, if they win those golf tournaments and Keegan Bradley somehow moves down the rankings into 11, 12, 13, I think it's an entirely different conversation. And then you could potentially make the case that he could be replaceable as a player. However, conversely, if he plays great and he gets even closer to the top 6, then I think it's a no-brainer. You have to put him on the team because he's playing one of the best of the Americans.
We had his press conference in addition to Amy's interview with Keegan, and I was struck by how tired he sounded, especially when he was sitting down in the presser, just kind of leaning forward a little bit. I mean, this is coming off of a very big and emotional week and victory for him in Connecticut, not far from where he grew up. I just wonder how taxing being a player would be, and even having to think about the potentiality of pairings and practice rounds and concessions and speeches and NBC interviews, pre-match. I think it's neat. Like, I think Collin and Patrick think it's cool that their captain is playing so well. And Patrick brought up the President's Cup in Tiger in 2019.
But I think that's like an entirely different animal.
Okay,
there's more days. It's more spaced out. There's clearly less pressure. That was away from home. I mean, it's an entirely different animal. And keep in mind, the Americans were trailing heading into that final day. They were looking at a very rare loss in the President's Cup if they didn't have a final day rally, of course, spurred by Tiger, the playing captain himself. But I don't necessarily see the comparisons. To me, the Ryder Cup is a whole different behemoth.
I identify Keegan Bradley as a player, and I think he does as well. And listen, he's only played on 2 Ryder Cup teams. He has missed it as a player. I know he got a lot out of last year's President's Cup and getting the clinching point and being the elder statesman on that team. But I would think that deep down, he wants one more Ryder Cup at least as a player. And I think the captaincy kind of complicates that. No one could have known he would continue to play at the high level. The thought is you put the captain's hat on, the headset.
PGA of America did. Seth Wass said, we want you to be the first playing captain since 1963. Apparently unaware of the potential complications that you could now have. And look, even if Keegan Bradley is a playing captain, so to speak, even if he does play on his own team, it would just be a playing captain in name only.
I agree.
This would be a captain by committee. You would think Jim Furyk, who has plenty of experience, would sort of be the head of this new committee. Brant Snedeker, the future President's Cup captain.
There for jokes and loosening it up, loosening everybody up.
Webb is there. It would be a team effort.
Yeah.
But look, Keegan Bradley is still going to have his attention divided. Even if you tell him, just go inside the ropes and get a point for Team USA. He's still going to be thinking about the future, what's going to happen, potential pairings, who's going to have the final say, who has to meet with the media. It's too much for one man to handle in the current environment, even if it is sort of in name only. I don't like the scenario. Right now, I would still have him, as Keegan Bradley says, as just the captain.
Each role takes so much focus, whether you're the Ryder Cup captain or a Ryder Cup player. Your focus has to be singular. Your energy level has to be directed and not distracted. And I think that that's been proven time and time again in these matches. It's everything. It's Rory shouting in the car park. You know, it's Ben Crenshaw's Saturday night. It's Justin Leonard running around the green. It's all of those things. It's the history, it's the passion, it's the emotion. And I don't think in a role of that import that you can have divided loyalties. And I mean that on your own team. Like, well, what am I focusing on? It's got to be all in one way or the other. I think you're right. He may be captain in name, but behind the scenes, those other four guys will be pulling the levers, I think, in carrying the lion's share of the decision-making.
And every coach, you know, every manager, every captain is expecting the players to be fully invested in their job. Keegan Bradley is the single most important person as a part of Team USA. And how can you have that most important person potentially not be fully invested in one role? To me, that's just not a favorable scenario for success for what should be a pretty convincing U.S. victory at home and all the potential advantages he would have there.